Hi guys, I hope you're well. It's been raining in London, so that's why I'm wrapped up tonight. So I was going to talk to you actually about it's a post that I read today, and it very much piqued my interest. And I won't say where it came from. It's more that I want to ask you, especially if you're someone who has PTSD. Really, I'm reaching out to you here. I want to know what you think. Okay, so I'm going to read it to you first, and then I'll tell you a bit about what I thought. So that gives you a chance to have a reaction first. Okay, so PTSD is not a mental illness. It is a psychological injury. How does your brain change with PTSD? The hippocampus shrinks. So that's the area where we think about our past memories and our present. There's increased activity in the amygdala. So that's linked to our emotions and our fear response. And then the prefrontal cortex shrinks. So that's where we regulate our negative emotions. These changes in brain chemistry are the reason why only treatments such as EMDR and CBT can fully reverse the effects of PTSD. So let me read those two key sentences. Okay, so the first one is PTSD is not a mental illness. It's a psychological injury. And here's the second one again. These changes in brain chemistry are the reasons why only treatments such as EMDR and CBT can fully reverse the effects of PTSD. Here's my response. I was outraged. I was I was raging, if I'm honest with you. At first I was confused, and then I was raging. And I'll tell you why. First of all, when I first, it wasn't even, I don't know if it would have been PTSD. Yes, it would have been. I mean, I hadn't been diagnosed, but I had had some experiences where I had a feeling this is what it was myself. But I couldn't reconcile with the war veteran, me having not been through something like that. I was like, can I really have the same diagnosis as someone who's been through this kind of experience? Because for me, this was obviously, now I'm like, yes, you can. Trauma is a range of different experiences. So obviously, trauma is very different to high anxiety, to depression. We're talking about a disorder here. But essentially, so I hadn't been diagnosed at this stage, but I went back to work. So it'd been about 2.5 months since since I was exposed to what led into PTSD. And I remember being there with a colleague, and both of her parents are psychologists. And we went outside for a chat. And I mean, I was in a right state. I mean, let's not pretend I kind of went, okay, let's go for a talk. No way. This was at the beginning. This was like, I need to get outside. And she's like, okay, let's go together and I'll walk you out. And okay, so this is the kind of situation we're in. And we were talking, and I turned around to her and said, have I got a mental illness? And she was like, yes, you do. And I said, really? And she's like, you do realize that you have a mental illness? And I was like, oh, because I knew that what was going on was random and different and extreme, and it came from an extreme place. But having the label of being mentally ill from colleagues, from society was a massive thing. It was massive. It was like, this is my new identity, is it? You know, so how long is this going to stay with me? When am I going to be okay, kind of thing? Because that's normally how illness works. You know, you recuperate, you go back to your life, you get on with it. I mean, I've been off work for some really serious, like, I don't know if it would have, I would have thought they were really horrendous colds, but I mean, you know, I've had times where I've had to take a week off work. I've had to, not, you know, not signed off work. I mean, like, you know, when you get really ill, and they'd let me work at home instead, or they'd let me have the time off. The point I'm making is there was kind of like a point at which I was like, okay, I don't feel great, but I'm going to go back to work. And then slowly I'd come back to my normal self, and then we're off. This was not like that at all. It was completely different, like beyond anything I'd ever experienced, so I thought. But anyway, you know, so I've come out as someone with mental illness, and since that I have been called all sorts of things by people on the street, you know, telling me I need to get medicated, like I already am. Get sorted. It's like I've got a doctor and a therapist. Oh, you're a freak, you're the, you know, because they see me ticking. And I just think, you know, like, I'm not here sitting here wanting everyone to understand what PTSD is and, you know, expecting people to understand, because you won't unless you have it. And that's a fact. Okay. If you don't go through an extreme experience, how can you understand what it's like? I've never jumped out of a plane. I don't know what it feels like. I can imagine it's a rush. I can imagine it's quite scary, but I don't actually know. I do not have that visceral experience. So, you know, I don't need people to sit there and go, I understand, I get it, unless you have PTSD or you've been exposed to it by someone in your family. But even people in your family, you won't necessarily understand what they're going through. You will observe what they're going through. That's why I said this is really quite a question for people with PTSD, because we're the ones being observed here, and we're the ones being diagnosed and told what label we, you know, what categorization we are. And I like having a diagnosis, genuinely do, because I know what I'm dealing with, and I can get either the treatment that I need, the healthy activities that I need, the right therapist in the right area, all that kind of stuff. So I'm fine. I'm absolutely happy to be diagnosed with PTSD instead of not knowing what's going on with me. But to then be told it's a mental illness, it's a brain injury, it's a this, it's a that, it's a disorder, I'm just like, stop, okay? I mean, all those things that they said about the brain was true. And what I would also say is that, you know, I'm not ready to talk about it, like, you know, publicly, but I have experienced PTSD twice in my life, and once was as a child. And so I'm very well aware of the argument that it affects your brain chemistry. And it's really interesting that as getting PTSD as an adult, I remember saying to my therapist, it's not like all of these things that are happening to me are completely brand new. I've always been really sensitive about certain things, but they're just so extreme now. So I've actually had that brain chemistry change at quite a young age, but it's so extreme as an adult, this experience. And what am I continually getting brain injury? And also what upsets me is that these aren't situations that, you know, any of us with PTSD have created. They're things that we've been exposed to, you know. So I'm like, I just can't get with that injury thing. And I actually said to them, like, hey, I've come out and said I've got a mental illness, and I've become comfortable saying that, and I've put it on my website, and I've put my journey out there. I didn't say all of this. I just said I've become comfortable with saying I have a mental illness. You know, it's a big thing to tell people. Yeah, it's like a potential partner. Hi, I've got a mental illness and I take medication. They're going to be like, oh, great, you know, potentially. Depends how well we know each other. I mean, there's just so much to think about. So for me, I was just like, you know, I said to them, like, I've just got my head around telling people that's what I've got. I'm not going to start backtracking now and say I've got a brain injury. Like, I talk about this is what I want to get across to anyone who has PTSD and anyone who doesn't. It's mind and body. It's a combinational reaction that you have. And so we're looking at mind and body balance. I'm not interested in mental health, and I'm not interested in physical health as separate entities. I'm interested in body and mind balance. That's where you find your contentment. That's where you find your best health. That's how you regulate your emotions, and how you can actually process them and grow from them. That really is where I'm coming from anyway. So, and the other people have said, you've got charities, you've got people who have done various different disciplines. And for me, my discipline is the exercise, and it's the decluttering and the organizing, and it's the mindset, the motivation, finding things that inspire you. Also, how do you deal with those really challenging days? And having the condition myself, there's that empathy that's, and useful suggestions, so it really riled me. I'd love to know what you think. I'd also like to say this, and I'd like to consider this, because again, I don't know how you feel, but we've got the 17 or 18 symptoms with PTSD. And if you have so many of them, then you're likely to get the diagnosis. And so we've all had this 17 to 18 symptom, have I got this, have I got that? So there is this commonality between us that we can understand. And this is what I'd say. By then saying it's not a mental illness, that really disturbs me a bit, because I wrote down some of my symptoms. So first of all, I've got anxiety disorder, which PTSD is an anxiety disorder. I was originally diagnosed with panic disorder. And that's considered a mental illness, because obviously here's the regular reaction, and then here's your reaction, or I don't know how to illustrate it really. I mean, you know what I'm saying though, like disorder means you're having like an extreme reaction to something which the majority of people find every day or quite manageable. And interestingly, I can sit here as someone who, I know I've said I've had it's happened twice, but it happens to you as a child. If it's left undiagnosed, you just get on with it. You really do, because everyone in your life is like, go here, be here, do that, exams, school trips. It's not like you're going, I can't do this. And you don't have the vocabulary either. People think you're being lazy or withdrawn or goth, emo, all these different descriptions. And you don't have the vocabulary or the framework to explain yourself, because you don't know. Whereas when it happens to you, like now as a full-on adult, and I've been through, I've done my studies where I've talked about things like feminism, mental illness, social injustices, all sorts of things. I've got all this different vocabulary now, talked about, ideas of, when we have these conversations about consent, about how people represent them in clothes, and how that doesn't reflect, how you perceive their boundaries. It's not for you to perceive someone's boundaries as, I can touch them and do what I want because they wear like little tops, that kind of, there's so many discussions that come up. And so obviously having more language and vocabulary and experience and is different as an adult. Some people find it really hard to explain themselves, but you definitely stand a better chance than a child does. So, I think another thing that I've experienced is OCD tendencies. So I've always been someone who's a bit like neat freak sometimes, and at the same time I can be absolutely messy, and because I'm a collector. So for example, I can have a room in the house where I'm like collecting, there's loads of stuff around you, craft, stuff to look at, things I've made. I can quite happily have a room like that. But when it comes to things like kitchen, bathroom, living room, there's specific things that go in there. I like them to be ordered. I don't like the carpet to get dirty. But this is all, normal standards of, this is a standard of living. I'm not going to live in a dirty, dusty house. I don't like everything to be piled around me, except for one like breakout, like one room in the house where it's like chill out, do your art, do whatever you want, have stacks of paper, glitter, whatever. That's kind of my attitude. I'm not someone who's like everything has to be, super clean or sparkling or organized or straight lines, or I'm not like that. And I'm not saying everyone with OCD is. I mean, sometimes with OCD you're counting things off, sometimes it's about the clicks, you're waiting for the click. See, now I have that. So I have that, and I've had that ever since my PTSD developed as an adult, and what happened to me. So for example, I have to tap off when I close the door to the car, for example. I have my taps, and if I hear the sounds, I have to do the tap. I have to tap off sounds, and I used to have to hear the click for the door, but actually now I can't deal with it. So and OCD is a mental illness. It's on the mental it's a mental health concern, but depending on how far along the disorder if it becomes a disorder for you, it's considered a mental illness until you find balance, until you find a way of putting instead of using OCD to control things, use something to control OCD. So it's this balancing act. Eating disorders, I mean, this is a very sensitive subject. It's not something I'm going into right now, but I tell you this, I have been very affected in terms of the way I guess I managed things when I was younger. Was a lot to do with things like eating and having strange relationships with that. And I do agree that it came from, as a lot of people say, exposure to the media, exposure to, celebrities on TV, where you're like, I'm 12 years old and she's thinner than me and she's like 20 something. Like, it's quite confusing. Like there was things like that, but I think there was also a level of control that you gain through these situations. And there's a level of, I don't put it just down to exposure to, I mean, I think that's a great big influence on you, but I think there's also, with some of us, there's a tendency to be looking for these ways of control. And for some people it might be, hurting themselves, like some people with the cigarettes, and that's really a very bringing pain to the surface, really, like going from the mental into the physical, where you can maybe deal with it. It's not as like, I don't, but then with the eating, that's a form of self-harm as well. If you're not eating, or if you're eating and then doing other things, I think, and that's considered a mental illness. Eating disorders are considered a very serious mental illness that, you really need to look after people. And these were some of the symptoms that were coming up for me with PTSD. I just think, I'm not trying to say, I guess it just really freaked me out, because I'm like, I've gone on this big old journey and I've come out of this, and now you're telling me no, actually. And I could have scientists and therapists and people picking over what they think what's going on and what they don't think's going on. And I mean, one person I was talking to used to tell me to chill out and not to pick my battles and not get so angry and upset with people. When I developed PTSD, they said to me, you know, you need to look after yourself. You can't be in these situations. And I was like, I can't help it. I can't help it. I need to scream. I don't understand. I need them to get away from me. And after quite a few years of talking, it's come to their attention that rage is actually not only a really big thing with PTSD, the condition, but for women who have PTSD. So not so much the male, the men, you know, will, I mean, I'm sure they rage, but they're also a lot, it would seem more susceptible in a lot of cases to treatment, such as, you know, calming techniques, exercises, things like that. Whereas rage for women, and some men retreat a little as well. They might go a bit quieter, a bit more in themselves. Whereas there's studies suggesting that women get very like rageful, and I absolutely could do a whole video on that. So, you know, so for a professional, for the various professionals I meet, they've all had little bits that they've told me that have been like great, amazing, that really makes sense. That's how my brain's working. That's why my body's doing this. That's why when everyone says to me, you are mentally ill, I'm like, well, stop ticking, stop moving. And I'm like, I can't, there's something going on. I can't stop. And you know, and then I learned that it's like my nervous system and, you know, the messages between my brain and my body. And it's just like that was amazing to learn. Absolutely amazing. But I can't listen to everything all at once and just jump from one person's theory or idea to another. So they're going to have to do a little bit more, I think, explanation into why I might consider myself to have a brain injury. I know I've got chemical imbalance, and I know we do with PTSD have that. Maybe you could call it that, but we're not even considered to have a mental illness. We're not considered to have a disability by having this mental illness, which is another thing I find interesting, but I'm not going to talk about now. But just in the sense that if you think about it, I wouldn't be able to get on a train or a tube. That's why I drive. I cannot go to crowded places and loud places. That's why I promote outdoor fitness and going to lovely fields and gardens, and or being at your home, you know, somewhere you feel like comfortable and safe. I used to love festivals and gigs and everything. I would struggle to go to something like that now. I certainly couldn't be in around all the people, like all crammed together. So how does that run into being, you know, debilitating for me? Oh, I haven't been able to go back to my job. I can't go to a cinema and watch a film, not without getting scared witless within the first few minutes and having to run out. There's loads of TV shows that I can't watch. People go, let's watch this series. I'm like, no, there's shouting and guns and arguing, and no. You know, there's certain things that I can't deal with. So I was at the park and all these cars were like driving down the road, down the dual carriageway, and they'd all got they'd modified their exhaust, so they were making these, you know, loud banging sounds. I was just like tick, 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 tick. I was trying to dance and I could hear it over my music. So I don't want to go and, you know, I'm not saying that we do or we don't have a disability, but what I would, you know, I'm just trying to raise these ideas and kind of just put it out there to think about, you know, because it's hard to know where you stand with PTSD a little bit, because we have a little bit of everything going on. And that's why I really want to stand together. And that's why I really wanted to have this group, so that, you know, I can have these conversations with other people with the condition. And you might say to me, you know what, I'm more comfortable calling it a brain injury. I think, you know, there's implications with that, but, you know, I want your opinion. You've had mine. So I would love yours. Okay, I think that's enough for tonight. I was going to say stay, but it's just not true. That's why the curtain's closed. um, but yeah, I look forward to speaking to you again soon. I hope that you have a decent start to your week. I hope that if you have some difficult points, that you find a way of managing it, or you have a really lovely sleep and try and rejuvenate. All right, I'll speak to you soon. Bye.